In Photoshop, a stroke is an outline, and these outlines can really help to make your content pop. It allows you to add a subsequent layer around whatever your content is and make that outline any color you'd like, also any size you'd like. But what if you want multiple strokes around one piece of content? Photoshop does not have a function for this. We'll make strokes in our Layers Style panel, and there's an option in there to add a second, third, or many more strokes. But when you make these visible, only one is shown. In this video, we're going to find a way to circumvent Photoshop's limit on multiple strokes and add as many as we'd like. Okay, let's say I'm making a sign and I want it to really pop. So I'm going to make a sign for my lemonade stand. So I've opened up a new document here and I've just got a bunch of white space. And I'm going to go to my text tool. You can come over here to your tools panel and click on text tool, or you can just hit T, shortcut T, and that'll bring you to text. And up here, you can choose your color. I've chosen a light yellow for my lemonade stand, fittingly, and right now my text size is set to 140 point. So if I click anywhere and I write free lemonade, I'm not gonna make a lot of money on this business, but that's okay. And then I hit V, which will bring me back to my move tool, or I can come over here to the tools panel and click on the move tool. Then I can drag it around to where I need it. And if I hit T again to go back to my text tool or come back to my T over here, then I can give it a little bit of an arc. That's a bit much, so I'm going to move it down like so. All right, so I really want this sign to pop, and one of the things that I can do is to give it a stroke. So I'm going to come over to this layer, and right to the side of where the text is, I'm going to double click, and that will bring up my layer style panel. So I'm going to come down here to stroke, and it automatically turns on. You can see I've got this light magenta. That looks okay for me for now. You have a few options here. You have your size, which could make it really large. You have your positioning, which could hit your stroke on the inside, which would make your letters smaller, on the center, which sort of borders both in and out, or on the outside. I'm going to stick with outside today because we're going to build up upon that. And then we have our blend mode, which we can get to later. Normally that is only important when we have some color behind it. So I will say okay. And just one quick note, this used to happen to me a lot. I'm going to back up for a second by hitting Command Z. If you click over here and that layer style panel comes up and you just select your stroke checkbox, you're not going to have any controls over it, and you're going to be like, this is not my stroke control. Well, it's not, because you're still on blending options. So just make sure that you highlight your stroke option and then you can control it. So I'm going to say okay, but now I want to do another stroke. I want there to be a different color behind it, but Photoshop does not allow you to do that. And so here is how we're going to skirt that rule. We are going to hover on this layer, hold down Option on a Mac, and click and drag, and that duplicates the layer and it pops it up right below the first layer. So I'm going to write 2, since this is a second lemonade layer. And you'll notice that the stroke and the effect has duplicated as well. So if I turn the first one off, the second layer still has the stroke around it. We could turn that off if we chose. But for now, we're going to keep it on. But what I want is it to be a different color. So I'm going to double click on that and come back to stroke again. And this time, I'm going to make it a little darker. And I'm going to blow it up a little more. So if I choose this ultramarine blue, and then I just use, with this number highlighted, I can just use my up arrow and move it up a good amount and say okay. Then when I come back and turn my first layer on, we'll see that it actually has captured both colors. So we've made that second layer just sit behind the first with a larger stroke. If we turn that first one off, we just have the dark blue stroke, but with it on, we have the light purple as well. So what we can do is just keep going. I'm going to go to number 2, hold down Option and duplicate again. This time I'm going to leave everything on so I can see what's on top of it. And I'm going to double click, go to stroke, and choose my color. This time I want something that's a little bit similar, but a bit oranger, a bit more orange, so we'll say okay. And right now you'll notice I can't see the orange at all. That's because I still have these other layers visible. But as soon as I start pumping up my pixels, I can see that orange stroke pop up. I could do it again if I wanted. Let's just name that 3 so we know where we're at. We'll duplicate 3. We'll name that 4. And we'll do one more really large version. Come down to stroke, select my color like this. Perfect. So now we have a sign that really pops because our free lemonade has 4 strokes, even though Photoshop did not want to allow us to do that any easier way. So I could always just change my background by highlighting it, going up to Edit, Fill, choose a color. I might just choose something light. And using my marquee tool, my selection tool, or just shortcut M to find that tool, rectangular marquee tool, we'll just get it a little bit more to size, image crop, and we've got a sign with all the colors that we wanted. You can put a stroke around any isolated element or content as long as it's on a layer. So here I have a drawing of Emmy from a while back in a Brillo box, and then I made a few elliptical shapes with my ellipsis tool. And what I want to do first is I'm going to isolate the space within the first drawing. You can see here I have 3 layers. I have a background, I have the drawing, and then I have these elliptical shapes. And so what I'm going to do is, while the drawing layer is selected, I'm going to use my wand tool, which we can find via shortcut W or over on the toolbar. And I'm going to make sure that contiguous is turned on. That way anything that's touching the space that I click on is not selected. Only the parts that are touching what I'm clicking on. And here I'm just clicking on white space. So by keeping that contiguous off, I'm making sure that the whole image isn't selected. So I have to find all the little bits that are separated by a black line, like the nose and collar, and even this little bit of the box. In our menu bar, I select Edit, Fill, and I'm going to fill all of this space that I've now selected with white. That ensures that when I turn these ellipses on, everything inside the drawing is covered. As you can see, I've missed a few spots, so I can zoom in a bit and take care of things like inside of the letters, inside of the jaw of the dog, and I'm going to leave this new as it is. I don't really mind that so much. Again, Edit, Fill, and I'll fill that with white. So I have this little set of ellipses, and I rasterize the layer, and now when I'm going to name this by double clicking on it. I'm going to call this one Original, so I can keep track. And then I'm going to double click in that space right next to it. And I'm going to navigate down here to stroke. If I just hit stroke, I'll notice that a stroke turns on, but I can't control it because I haven't highlighted it. So I want to come down and highlight it. I'm going to turn the stroke to something actually a little bit closer to the original. So I'm going to move something a little bit orange, and I'm going to position it, say okay, position outside, and I'm going to just do maybe 10 pixels just to get a nice light outline. And if I want to continue adding to those circles, then all I have to do is hold down on my Option key while I'm hovering over this original layer, click and drag, and I'm going to drag it right below. And so now this is original copy, so I'm going to name this one 1. And you'll see that it's not just duplicated the layer, but it's also duplicated the effect. So even if I turn the other layer off, you can still see this stroke, and you can see it here. We could turn it off if we chose to. But instead, what I'm going to do is turn both layers back on and double click in here again, and it'll bring that layer style back up. And for this stroke, I'm going to change it again. So I'm gonna start by changing my color, and I want to move it to maybe a little bit redder. You can't see it yet because this layer is still sitting underneath the original, but as I move my pixels up, just using my up arrow key, you can see that stroke start to grow. If you wanted to do another layer, we'll do the same thing. Option, click and drag, and we'll double click on this, and this time let's go to stroke and grab something drastically different, like say this light purple here. And instead of 50, I'll just enter 80. And so now we see that each of these layers has a subsequent stroke that surrounds it and creates this kind of funky style for my little dog in a box. And we can continue to do this, adding more and more layers. So that's what I'm doing here. At this point, I have so many that to organize them, I'm going to select them and put them into a folder, which is named Group 1. And I want to give my dog a little stroke too, so I can do that to this element as well. Find something a bit more pleasing for the background, and now we have a much flashier and catchier image.